kind of tags off of this morning really, the kind of 5 domains on the left hand side, what we mean by the 5 domains, any of this stuff you can kind of use, and almost like the kind of what would it look like if it was living and breathing in a coaching dynamic, or in you or in that other individual. So, you know, self-awareness might help you with confidence, that reflection that Lou talked about this morning, and the kind of reflective practice that leads to a better self-confidence. The realistic self-assessment, that sense that I really understand my SWOT, that I'm not a leaner on the weaknesses, I'm always beating myself up, but equally I'm not over-egging it with the strengths, and that I've got a good balance of a self-assessment. We're going to look at your SWOT that hopefully you've brought along in a minute. And this bit about kind of almost we do like this in the UK, don't we? You know, just that ability to poke fun at yourself and criticise yourself and be self-deprecating, but there's a line between that when it gets into imposter syndrome and negativity maybe. But self-regulation, acting with integrity, trustworthiness, these are some of the things that it would look like. Comfort with ambiguity, meaning, a bit of a jargon phrase, what do we mean with being comfortable with ambiguity? Happy with the vague, happy with grey, happy with not having everything solved. If you can't cope with ambiguity as a coach, you're going to really struggle. If it's all got to be in a box and everything's got to be in a plan and it's all got to be black and white, pack up and go home now. Ambiguity, that sense of kind of knowing the answer but not being able to give the answer, not quite got it sorted by the end of a coaching session, allowing it to trickle into the next coaching session, being able to cope with just holding the moment, you know, and not having everything neatly boxed off. Some of us can be a bit control freaky in that, and so we might struggle around that. One of them, can't we? You know what I mean? So being comfortable with that and open to change. Motivation, just that pushing into optimism. We know from our psychometrics, some of us have got a natural bias to optimism, some of us not. Coaching is all about optimistic, it's all about belief, it's all about confidence, it's all about motivation. So if we haven't got that as a natural trait, we're going to have to work harder on that, and the evidence seems to be that we can work harder. Empathy, talent, cross-cultural stuff we talked about, and Daniel Goleman talks about that in terms of countries. Some countries are better at it than others, but it's also about the culture of your organisation. Some cultures, I don't want to look anywhere, but some cultures are more empathetic than others, aren't they? Kind of thing he says, without trying to make any unconscious bias assumptions. But some organisations just have a natural empathetic style and approach. It's quite normal and natural to talk about how you're feeling, how you're doing. Others, it's like, no, we do this here, thank you very much, you know. And people skills, you know, leading, persuasiveness, the Daniel Carnegie stuff that we were talking about just before lunch. So that's the kind of what it would look like on the right hand side. And you've got this little grid, and we're going to do a self-assessment in a minute, a kind of a reflection on how you're doing against the 5 domains, because my guess is you'll be really strong in some areas and working harder in other areas, unless you've got more nailed, of course, in which case you can go and have a cup of coffee when we do that. But I've got a sneaky feeling we've all got work to do, haven't we? If you would, let's just do a couple of conversations if we can, thinking about those 5 domains. And I don't want to give you too much structure around this, but I do want you to land this properly in coaching conversations. So I guess the best brief that I can think is that if these 5 domains in you, in the relationship, were living and breathing, and I could see them and rate them and think this is a really emotionally intelligent conversation, what would that look like? I mean, there's a few clues on the slide before, but what would you be doing if you were to push on another step or 2 in your self-awareness? What could you be doing? What should you be doing? If you were to push on 1 or 2 steps in your empathy. And I want you to land it in your real coachees, if that makes sense. So imagine in your mind's eye your 3 coachees. What does it mean to take that relationship to the next level in the 5 domains? Does that make sense as an exercise? I know it's a bit vague, but I think it's really important to kind of almost like conceptualise. If I were working with John and I needed to develop my empathy with John better, what might be the opportunities? What could I be saying? What could I be doing? How would I be acting? How might I pick up on some of the things that John's raised next time? Is that making sense?
Is it so, like, say for example, I obviously, as you know, struggle with problem solving. So I would look at my coachees and rather than problem solve, how would I approach it differently? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, possibly. The empathy bit, you might want to, your natural thing is to go in and solve, but actually the empathy bit is about trying to draw out of them, possibly. But absolutely. So just thinking, you've got your real world coaches, your names, your faces in your heads, I haven't. Thinking about those real world people, have a conversation with the person next door to you around, if I were to just dial up a notch in my relationship with them around self-awareness, empathy, motivation, self-regulation or social skill, what are 1, 2, 3 things that I could do over the next 2 or 3 coaching sessions that would just add, progress, throw some pebbles in the pond towards building better emotional intelligence, developing that in me? But you're thinking of real life people, okay?